Will be releasing the results of the quarterly labour force survey for the first quarter of this year later this morning around 11 o'clock or so. Now we're joined via Skype by Bonang Mohale. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Business Leadership South Africa. Bonang, thank you very much indeed for coming through. Some economists, as we've been listening to, expect the unemployment rate to increase for the first quarter. You agree?
I absolutely agree. Remember, when we speak about the 9 wasted years, unfortunately, we are now seeing the manifestation of that. In fact, these 9 wasted years, we guess, has taken us probably backwards about 20 years. And you see how it really shows up. The economy is on its knees. Young black graduates roam the streets hopelessly. There's inequality that has now widened. Racism is at an all-time high. Public schooling is broken. Public hospitals continue to fail the poor and the vulnerable, and crucial infrastructure is in decay. And lawlessness is now epidemic. Under those circumstances, how do we hope that we will have a much more reliable environment that is conducive for businesses to invest? So I think we have cut our own nose to spite our own face. So as business, we are really not totally surprised. I think what we need to do is redouble our efforts in a number of areas. Firstly, we need to ensure that and accept that all of us have collectively failed in eradicating the legacy of apartheid.
I see there's Bonang, I see there's no room for Pollyanna here. You're painting a very bleak picture. What's the way forward? Are you hopeful, though?
Very hopeful indeed. That's why I'm saying, first, it starts by all we need to continue the unfinished work of eradicating the legacy of apartheid. We need to root out and defeat state capture. We need clear enforced rule of law. We need to fix EXCOM. We also need to reduce the government debt. We need to reduce the bloated civil service that came about as a direct result of patronage. What we need is a trimmed down corruption-fighting cabinet. We also are clear that we need to accelerate the rate of transformation. There ought to be facilitation of the creation of this job in large numbers. And the last two for me is prioritizing an inclusive socio-economic growth. And then lastly, we need to rededicate ourselves to the huge infrastructure investment that we need to make. That's how jobs are going to be created. In fact, if one thinks about it quite critically, there are as many people unemployed as there is the population of Gauteng, just as a measure of magnitude.
Look, some economists have cited the job losses in the manufacturing sector. Just tell us how important this sector is.
So first of all, we went to the World Economic Forum at the beginning of the year. We made 5 promises, and one of them was to focus on 4 industries that can really create jobs in large numbers. We talk about job-absorbing sectors. It's manufacturing, it's agriculture, it's tourism, and indeed it's information communications technology, ICT for short.
Yeah.
Back to you, my dear brother.
You can throw mining into that as well, isn't it? To what extent will young people be affected, Bonang?
Look, I like the fact that you start with mining. You know, we used to be the #1 gold producer in the world, producing 1,000 tons of gold a year every year. Today, we are not even in the top 5. If we produce 140,000 tons per annum, it will be too much. This industry used to employ about 1 million people, 750,000 20 years ago. Today, only 180,000 people are employed in the top 4 mining jobs. So if you have lost as many people, you can see that we have had a bloodbath of jobs. Young people are 60% of the population of 57.8 million South Africans. 35 years and younger. And I think before we even talk about the 4th industrial revolution, we need to be saying, how do we ensure that the 10 million people that are not in employment, education, and training, 6 million that are not gainfully employed, and we have tried some measures, youth employment service, where we wanted to create 3 million jobs in 3 years, 1 million a year. The president has launched the Job Summit, where we made 5 commitments. We came up with a package of 5 labor reforms. We talk mostly about the national minimum wage. I think before we even go there, we need to start saying, how do we expose our young people from as early as 3 years to the jobs that will be required in the 22nd century when you talk about 4IR in coding, not just the Internet of Things, and also cryptocurrencies. Over to you.
You've listed a number of sectors. Which sectors do you think will rebound the fastest, Bonang?
Tourism is the easiest. It's a low-hanging fruit because for every 8 tourists, we create 1 permanent job. There is no country in the world where we can say with confidence, whatever you need as a tourist, we've got it. South Africa has the oceans, has the big 5, has the mountains, has all the biodiversity. The report that has just been released now that shows that we are going to decimate 1,000 species, say the biggest impact is going to be in Southern Africa, purely and simply because we have done an embarrassingly good job in preserving our biodiversity. There are simply more animals in this country. So most countries specialize with 1 thing, 2 at the most. Here in Africa, we have everything imaginable. If you want it, it is here. One of the 7 wonders of the world is here. We've got the sun shining probably 11 out of 12 months in a year. People can come in and see the Hubble telescopes that we have put in the Karoo. They can come and see our mines in the belly of the earth, but also they can come and be in the presence of the mighty sharks in the 2 oceans, where the confluence happens at the southernmost tip of the continent. They can climb probably the second highest peak in the continent.
Mighty Sharks, I'm sure you're not talking about the rugby team, but they're good as well. Look, we no doubt spoiled for choice in terms of tourism. We've got about 3,000 kilometers of coastline here in South Africa. So indeed, this country is blessed in that regard. But what about load shedding? Has it also had a negative impact on the country's biggest employers?
There is no doubt. I mean, initially, in the last 10 years, electricity has been going up on average 30% when salaries are below 10%. So in nominal terms, we are going backwards. Secondly, we know that energy is the 4th means of production. Thirdly, the single systemic risk we have in this country is Eskom, borrowed to the hilt at 491 billion, which means their debt is now permanent, not even addressing the issue that Eskom is now a crime scene. I think when Eskom comes down to them not meeting their covenants, the whole economy folds with them. That's why all of us need to work hard to make sure that we save Eskom in order to save the 700-odd state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies.
Yeah.
Because the 675 billion that is government guarantees becomes due and immediately payable if there is indeed an Eskom default. So electricity has been absolutely key because it drives most industries. You spoke about mining. If electricity is not assured, the 150,000 miners don't go down to almost 5 kilometers in Mponing, which is part of AngloGold Ashanti.
Look, we had some good news, Bonang, at the 4th quarter of 2018. The unemployment rate decreased in the 4th quarter of last year to 27.1%. But this, I guess, was more as a result of the seasonal employment during the festive season, correct?
You're absolutely correct. But also, let's not even think about it critically. 20 27.1% unemployment, it's an absolute national treasury. In Switzerland, when they reach 4% unemployment, they declare a national crisis. We estimate that for us to get back to where we ought to have been with the ushering in of the new dawn, imagine for a moment had we continued on the same trajectory of Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela South Africa, Thabo Mbeki's 43 consecutive quarters of positive GDP growth, you and I would be talking about an unemployment of 16, not 27.1%. We'll be talking about GDP growth of 6, not 0.8%, would have banked 1 trillion South African rands. But unfortunately, state capture has cost us 1.5 trillion South African rands in just the 4 years. The last 9 years, we have been siphoning off, on average, 100 billion rands per annum to just the 2 Zupta families. So you can see that it is self-harm. It is a self-inflicted pain. It's cutting our own nose to spite our own face. But be that as it may, we celebrate the fact that the 8th of May national elections, we voted for President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa. By the way, when we went to Polokwane 2007, the ANC was asking us, don't worry about President Jacob Zuma. Don't worry about the fact that he's been corrupt in exile. Don't worry about the fact that as the MEC of Economic Affairs in KwaZulu-Natal, he has been found wanting. Don't worry about the fact that he's facing a rape trial. Vote for the ANC because your liberator is the ANC. Isn't it amazing how now the tables have turned? We are now saying, don't vote for this ANC. Yes, ma'am?
Bonang, you're still live on the agenda. Yes. Look, we know the president has been on this, some call it a whirlwind tour, trying to get investment, international investment into the country. We know youth unemployment is a big issue here in South Africa. Some of the stats I've got in front of me. South Africa's national youth unemployment rate for those aged 15 to 24 numbered 54.7%, and that's the narrow definition. If you look at the expanded definition, it's about 67.6% expanded as at the fourth quarter of 2018. In terms of this investment, do you see it having any impact on the figures?
In fact, if you think about it, all the elements that were present during the Arab Spring are here and immediate. The only reason why Alexander has not gone up in flames, we put it down to the patience of our people. But it's not going to last for long. We have wasted an amazing opportunity, but we still have a chance. Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa is not our second, but our last chance. Like we said, the future belongs to these young people, 35 years and younger, because they are not the leaders of tomorrow, they are the leaders of today. We learned this morning that the average age of the past cabinet that we had is 54 years. In this one, we are hoping that we'll have more youngsters in positions of leadership. The youngest was a DAMP at 24, and yet we have forgotten that 6 MPs in Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela's cabinet were below 30, and that includes people like Togoti Diza. They include people like Maria Ramos at that time, who became the DG at less than 35. Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi was probably the youngest of the lot, even though she was a deputy minister at that time. So we used to have a time when we believed in the ingenuity, the energy, the force, the impetus of young people. Now we look at them and say, you don't have the requisite experience. I think these 91-year-olds that are still in cabinet at the moment should be taking a back seat, guiding, counseling, coaching, and holding by the hand another crop of 30-year-olds that should be preparing themselves to take us probably screaming by the scruff of our necks into the 22nd century.
Bonang, as always, interesting perspective. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Bonang Mohale is the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa. Remember, Statistics South Africa will release this unemployment figures at around 11 today. Stick around to SABC. We'll try to bring that to you live. In other news, Sipho Msaleko of Sakumnoto has accused Lawrence Mulaudzi of Kilimanjaro Capital of lying under oath before the Commission of Inquiry into allegations of impropriety at the PIC.